Today I'm going to be talking about all the books I read in the month of November. November was a huge reading month for me, and it was actually a pretty good reading month. I have a lot to talk about. I have a lot of good things to say. I'm excited about it. As always, we're gonna go in order from my least favorite to my most favorite, and luckily there's only a couple of books that'll be in that lower category, and then pretty soon we are in 3-star and above territory, so let's get into it. First up is The Lavender Haze by June Bates. This is a little book of sapphic poetry that kind of, I don't know if blew up is the right word, but from my little corner of TikTok at least, I was very aware of this book because it's a little book of sapphic poetry by this author June Bates who, like, you couldn't trace the author. I don't know if you can now and if that ever got figured out, but this became popular around October of last year when Midnights by Taylor Swift was coming out, and she has the song Lavender Haze. And I think this had come out like a little bit before the album came out and Midnights came out, and then people were getting this book and going through and seeing little references in it that seemed really similar to like things and motifs that Taylor Swift brings up often in her works. And notably, this is a book of sapphic poetry, and if you don't know, there's a lot of queer elements in Taylor Swift's music and a lot of signals that seem to show that Taylor Swift herself may or may not be sapphic based on the large amount of queer flagging she has done in her many years of creating music. Not something I'm getting into here, big discussion, but that's the corner of the internet I live on. And this became popular there, and my friend actually got this for me for my birthday, and so I finally read it, and I just didn't rate it because it's a little book of poetry. It goes very fast. There's just like tiny little kind of like milk and honey style poems in here. I thought it was really sweet that my friend got this for me and like knew that niche thing about me, but I have no idea how to put a rating on a book of poetry because I don't often read books of poetry. But it was really cool, glad to have my hands on it, and just a very niche thing about me. Next up is The Coworker by Freida McFadden, and this book I actually gave a 1 star. I thought it was so bad. I have read several books from Freida McFadden in the past, and I've always given her books 3 stars or above, but this one was just not very good at all. The premise of the story is that there's this woman and her coworker doesn't show up for work one day. She's now missing, and your main character kind of looks culpable for maybe what happened to the coworker, and she's trying to figure out what's happened to her coworker. That is like 90% of the book right there. It just stretches out and says the same thing over and over again, where it's like, oh God, she's missing and she was annoying, and like the main character maybe or maybe didn't kind of bully her, and so she kind of looks like she could be involved, and it just goes over and over and over and over, and then you get a twist at the end and there's a reveal, and then it wraps up pretty quickly. I was just really disappointed with it because I've enjoyed other stuff from Freida McFadden in the past. I also just thought the writing was just not good, and yeah, it was a pretty big letdown, so not one of Freida McFadden's that I would personally recommend. Next up is The Eden Test by Adam Sternberg, and I can't remember where I first heard about this book, but I have been very intrigued with it all year, and I got this as a gift for my birthday as well. I was finishing up some birthday books this month, and I was excited to read it, but I ended up actually not enjoying it that much, and I gave it a 2 star. The synopsis of this book is kind of similar to Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney, if you have read that one. I have read that one, and I really enjoyed that, so that made me intrigued for this one, but this one just did not really compare for me. In it, you're following a married couple who are going off to this marriage retreat. It's this retreat where they ask you 7 questions. You get a question a day. It's a 7-day retreat, and you talk through them with your partner, and at the end of it, your relationship will either be healed or you'll go your separate ways. But they're both kind of coming into the trip with secret motives. Dun dun dun. What happens from there? I will say this book is not even super memorable to me at this point. I do remember where it goes, but gosh, I won't remember it for long because it was just not very good. It was kind of obvious where things were going at certain points, and then I don't know. I love a ridiculous thriller. This one thought it was being ridiculous but didn't fully go there, you know? And it just didn't really work out for me. Disappointing because I was looking forward to it for a while, but didn't end up being a winner. Next up is Don't Let Her Stay by Nicola Sanders, and this is one that kind of blew up on TikTok this year. It is a Kindle Unlimited thriller that is about this married couple. A woman named Joanne is married to an older guy named Richard, and he has an adult daughter named Chloe. They also have a new baby together named Evie, but Chloe has been estranged from Richard's life, but now that he has another baby, she's kind of interested in coming back into their life, and they welcome her into the home, but then things start to seem dangerous in the house. Chloe comes in to be a nanny and help with the baby, but then Joanne starts feeling like she's losing her mind, misplacing things, missing important appointments, getting dates wrong. Could Joanne be going mad just like her own mother, or is it something more sinister happening? Is Chloe really here to help, or has Joanne made a terrible mistake by letting her move in? This one I ended up giving a 3-star. I thought it was just, you know, perfectly fine. Kind of average thriller. It was fun enough. Not quite as fast paced as I thought it might be. I usually kind of fly through these Kindle Unlimited thrillers, and this one I wasn't super hooked into the whole time. I think again, this one kind of had like a slow pace. It set up the story, got a little bit repetitive, and took a while to really get me more invested in what was going on in the second half of the book. But I thought it was fine if you're looking for a thriller to pass the time. This one's on Kindle Unlimited, and a lot of people have seemed to enjoy it this year. Next up is Rouge by Mona Awad. This was my book club pick for the month of November, and I was very highly anticipating it, but unfortunately, it only ended up being a 3-star. A 3-star is still good, but I thought this was going to be a 5-star. I just had a feeling, and I was led astray because it was not. It was not a 5-star for me. I wasn't led astray by anyone but my own hopes. This is a story about this woman whose mother has died. She's been kind of estranged from her mother. Her mother has died, and now she's returning back to her mother's home to prepare the funeral service and take care of her mother's assets and the house and all of that. And she ends up getting swept into this group of people who are obsessed with beauty that her mother was interacting with as well, and it leads her down a dark path. This book is said to be Snow White meets Eyes Wide Shut, and I had never seen Eyes Wide Shut, so I did watch the film before reading this book, and I definitely see a lot of similarities with the atmosphere and the general direction the story takes. So if you enjoy Eyes Wide Shut, I think it's a good comp title for this, especially if you're interested in general in the concept of beauty in the modern age. I think I just expected this book to say more than it did. I wanted it to be a more scathing critique of the beauty industry, and it really was just showing you this character's journey as she is grieving her mother and also falling down this path of being really influenced by the beauty industry, and it just shows you the story and lets you take away what you want to take away from it, and I just didn't feel like I took away a ton from it. I will say there were some really cool scenes in this that are super memorable. The ending portion was just absolutely incredible, and I love Mona Awad's mind and just these stories that she ends up telling. Like the places that she takes you are just unlike other books that you will read. So I do always appreciate a Mona Awad story. I will definitely be picking up whatever she does next, which I think is going to be a prequel to Bunny. I believe that is what she said is going to be coming next, and I did love Bunny. I'm a little nervous for a prequel, but I will trust Mona Awad. Next up is Homecoming by Kate Morton. This is a very long 544-page historical fiction mystery that is like a multi-generational family drama. You are following a main character named Jess, and her grandmother who raised her has recently fallen and become injured, so Jess goes back home to help take care of her grandmother. And while she is there, she starts to uncover some secrets about her family's history, and the whole story is her kind of piecing together what happened on this tragic night back in 1959 and how that connects to her story of who she is and her family in present day. I ended up giving this book a 3.5 star. I think it is very beautifully written. There were some really moving passages written in it, and in general I think the author is just very talented at creating a landscape and pulling you into it as a reader and developing characters that do feel very real and three-dimensional. This book also covers a lot of themes that I enjoy, such as family secrets and mother and daughter relationships, and especially like mothers and their daughters and the daughters of their daughters relationships, storytelling, like what it is to tell a story and how everyone has their own narratives and what that kind of means, even some like ethics of true crime kind of coming into this a little bit. Like there's a lot of themes that I do enjoy that end up coming out in this one. It was just very, very long. That was my only critique of it, is I do think it would have packed more of a punch had it been more compact and told the story quicker. For me, this was just really, really long. It took a long time to get through, and with the amount of story it was telling, it just didn't feel like it had enough to really carry it through that kind of length. It would just spend a really long time like developing a scene, when that is very impressive, but for scene after scene after scene, I would have felt like it was more impactful had it been more condensed, and then I would have probably taken more time with those beautiful moments, because I wouldn't be trying to really work my way through to the end of the story to see what happened. Also, I read this book because it was in the mystery thriller category for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and it is more of a literary type of book that made it into the category. I feel like this would have had a better fit in the historical fiction category or the literary fiction category. Probably historical fiction would be its best kind of fit. I don't know, I could also see it being the literary fiction just as equally. It is kind of weird that it ended up in the mystery thriller category, but we always get these kinds of books in that category that are more like commercial literary fiction that have a mystery subplot to them, which is definitely what this is. The mystery is like ongoing throughout the whole book. It's not like it's just one small portion of it. It's a mystery that Jess is trying to uncover about her family, but I don't know, it does just feel like an outlier from the more commercial thrillers that fill up a large portion of that category. So if you see this in the category and you're like, should I read that because I'm a mystery thriller lover? If you love like Riley Sager, this is not going to be the same vibe as like a Riley Sager book. This is way more of a literary book that has a lot of expansive writing and atmosphere building and scene building, and it is good, but it's just very different, which is important to know. Next up is Earthlings by Sayaka Murata, and this book I've had on my radar for a very, very long time, and I finally got around to reading it in November. This is a deceptively disturbing horror book based on the cover alone. I feel like if you look at this, wouldn't think it was going to go the direction that it does go. By the end of this book, this is another one that just has a really, really memorable scene in it that will just never leave my mind. In this story, you're following a girl named Natsuki, and she feels like an outsider to everyone around her. She observes the world around her as people being a part of a factory, getting sucked into this idea of life is all about finding a partner and having a child and working and raising them so that they'll find a partner and have a child. She sees that happening all around her, and she just does not feel like she subscribes to that. And because of that, she metaphorically and also kind of literally thinks that she is an alien who is observing Earthlings. And throughout the story, you are following her from being a young girl through adulthood, and then you see the effect that has on her as she tries to find a place in this world. You will never see where this book is going. You will not be able to predict the end. It's a journey. It is wild. And I ended up giving it 4 stars. Next up is another 4-star, and that is The Deep Sky by Yumi Kitasai, or Yumi Kitase. And this was my members book club pick for the month of October, but I just finished it like on the last day of October, the first day of November or something, so I didn't end up fitting it into my October wrap up. It is here in my November wrap up. You may recognize this book as being in the sci-fi category for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I was very excited to see it there because I did think it was quite good, especially because this is a debut novel and I was pretty impressed with it. In this story, you're following a woman named Asuka who is on board this spaceship which is on this long mission going to another planet. This is a little bit of a look in the future, like 5 minutes in the future, dystopian type of book where they are sending a ship to another planet to try to find another inhabitable land because they're kind of giving up on Earth due to the devastation that has taken place because of climate change. Asuka is now on this ship. It was like a 30-year mission, I think. The first 10 years they spend in this hibernation asleep. They spend 10 years awake, and the goal of that time is for them to become impregnated. It's all childbearing people with uteruses on the ship so that they can all be impregnated and birth ideally 2 children. Then they'll sleep for another 10 years, then they'll wake up and they will start a new civilization on a new planet. You're following them, I think, at year 11, so it's after they've woken up and they've been awake for a little bit, and then the ship ends up getting sabotaged in a way, and it seems like someone, whether from the inside or outside, is trying to get the ship off course or potentially like damage the ship or potentially kill the people in the ship, and Asuka ends up being at the center of that mystery, working to figure out who is responsible for this. So it's like a murder mystery, kind of locked room because they're on a spaceship, and a sci-fi because, you know, there's the space element, there's the climate change stuff going on planet Earth, and I thought it was just a pretty good book. I was really engaged in the story. I really liked the characters. I really liked Asuka as a main character. It was also interesting because it would flash to different points in time and kind of talk about Asuka's relationship with her mother and her family, but also her time going through this training camp that you had to go to in order to make it on the spaceship. Also, Asuka is half Japanese, and she contends a lot with her feelings of imposter syndrome in a way because she is representing Japan on this mission, but because she is only half Japanese and she was living in America, she struggles with that element of her identity and representing Japan while on this mission. There's just a lot. This book talks about and has to uncover. Also this concept of like how we treat the earth and how we approach things like climate change, because there's this whole kind of division of how people look at things in this world, where some people think, okay, there's climate change problems happening on earth, let's try to solve them. And then another portion of people are abandoning all hope of earth and they're like, send the spaceship and go find another planet for us to live on. So kind of like that environmental conversation comes into the book as well. And I just thought it was well crafted. I had a good time with it, and I will definitely be looking out for more from this author in the future. Next up is Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Q. Sutanto. And I am so proud that I got that title fully correct. I think that's probably the first time I've done that. This is a cozy murder mystery that was featured in the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I have kind of had my eye on it for a large portion of the year because I've been feeling like I'm getting into a place where I want to read more cozy mysteries, and I knew this one was a popular one and I figured it would be in the Goodreads Choice Awards. So I was excited to read it around this time of year, and I'm very glad I did because I really enjoyed it, and I ended up giving it a 4-star. In this story, you are following an older woman named Vera Wong who owns a little tea shop, and it is so sad in the beginning because people don't really come to her tea shop and she's always just there alone and just brewing her tea, and she is just such a character. Like, she just says things how they are, and she is like sour on the outside, sweet on the inside, you know, like she's such a fun character to follow. Anyway, one day her life is disrupted when she finds a dead body in her tea shop, and she kind of tampers with the evidence a little bit because she's like, I know I can solve this faster than the cops can, so let me just take this flash drive I see in this dead man's hand and let me start investigating, figuring out people involved in his life, putting the pieces together, and bringing my suspects together as I investigated them along the way. And it was so charming and warm and wonderful and funny and everything I wanted it to be, and it was a really, really good kickoff into getting me really interested in exploring more cozy mysteries. It didn't quite get that 5-star feeling, but not a lot did this month. Everything was just kind of like really good, but not like amazing all-time favorite. So that could have just been the effect of me reading a lot of good books this month, that it was harder for a book to stand out as a 5, but it was close, and I'm very excited to explore more in the genre. Next up is The Maid's Diary by Loreth Ann White, and this is another Kindle Unlimited thriller that made it into the mystery thriller section of the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I was actually pleasantly surprised with this one. After a string of reading disappointing Kindle Unlimited thrillers, I was really worried for this one because I did see a lot of buzz about this one on TikTok throughout the year, but I also saw buzz for Don't Let Her Stay, and not necessarily The Coworker by Freida McFadden, but just Freida McFadden in general. And then I was worried that this one was also going to let me down, but I think it actually worked out for the best that this is the last one that I read, because I actually was pretty impressed and had a really good time with it, and I ended up giving it a 4-star. I was really nervous that this was going to emulate The Housemaid by Freida McFadden and just be like another kind of retelling of that kind of story just based off of the title and the synopsis and the general vibe this book was giving, but it was nothing like that. Nothing like that at all. In this story, there is a maid named Kit Darling, but she is missing. So you're not following her story, and you're not following her from the beginning, working for this family, and all these things happen. At the beginning of the book, she's missing, and you're reading excerpts of her diary throughout the story. You also follow the perspective of a homicide cop named Mallory Van Alst, who is called to a scene at a luxury waterfront home known as the Glass House, and is confronted with evidence of a violent attack so bloody it's improbable the victim is alive, but there's no body, the homeowners are gone, and their maid is missing. The only witness is the elderly woman next door who woke to screams in the night. The neighbor was also the last person to see Kit Darling alive. You're also following the perspective of that elderly woman a little bit. You follow the perspective of the detective. You follow the perspective of some other people who were friends with the homeowners. There's a lot of different people who come into this story, and it ends up being quite complex. I wasn't really expecting that. I thought it was going to be very surface level, but I was really immersed in this. I really enjoyed the way the mystery was laid out, the complexity of it, how things came together, and there was quite a good surprise in this one as well. So I was pleasantly surprised by it. I think this is a good one to pick up if you're just a lover of mystery thrillers. And I also have been feeling like my reading is also heading in the direction of potentially reading more detective crime type of fiction, which this one kind of fits since you do get a detective perspective in this one. So I feel like that was a good sign for that as well. And lastly is The Center by Aisha Manazir Siddiqui. And I originally gave this book, I think, a 4-star or 4.5 when I read it. And then after sitting on it, I just bumped it up to a 5 because I did really enjoy this book. And actually, looking back at my full month, I feel like a pretty good kind of comp title for this would be something like Rouge. If you read Rouge and you just kind of wanted something a little more concise and maybe even a little less weird, although it's kind of along the same veins of weirdness, then I feel like it's worth giving something like The Center a try. The main thing that I loved about this was the voice of this character. I thought the writing was just so sharp, and this book is actually coming from Gillian Flynn's publishing imprint. This is now the second book I've read from that imprint. The first one was Scourged Grace, which I DNF'd. Didn't really love that one, but this one I loved. And now I'm feeling really hopeful for exploring more books within this imprint, if this is any indication of the quality of books that are going to come out of that, because I was really impressed with this one. In it, you're following a woman named Anissa who is currently just a little unhappy in her life. Her current job is that she is subtitling Bollywood movies in her London apartment and living off her parents' generous allowance, but she dreams of being a translator of great works of literature. And she has this boyfriend who ends up just being able to speak a ton of languages, and he's able to do a lot with that. And he ends up letting her in on the secret that he has been able to go to this place called The Center, where you can learn a whole language really, really fast and become completely fluent in it. And so she wants in on that. She wants to go so that she's able to learn a new language and be able to be a translator of great works of literature. And she ends up going to the center and uncovering the dark truth of the cost of attending this place. I think this book was just so smartly written in both the actual words that are on the page just being so well constructed, but also the story it's telling and the themes that it covers relating to things like literature and language and colonialism. There's a lot to unpack within this one, and it's pretty brief. It doesn't go on for too long, so that it gives you just enough to open some conversations about. And this book kind of had that dream-like quality that I like in weird horror books as well. There was just a lot to like about it. It was just really, really good. And I think this is also a debut novel from this writer, so I had some good luck with some debut novels this month. Hello, popping in to talk about one more book. I had a chaotic reading month going on in November because I was working on all these videos that were interconnected and the timing needed to make sense, and I had to wait to put my November wrap up out until I put out my Goodreads vlog video, but I had to put my Goodreads vlog video out after my Goodreads reaction video. All of those videos are out now. You can go watch them if you haven't seen them yet. Please, for the love of God, do, because I worked so hard on them. But I finished the last book that needs to be included in this wrap up because I'm not gonna wait until my December wrap up to talk about it. It was in my November videos, so it makes sense to be here. And that is Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. I ended up giving this book a 5-star. It was a little bit of a soft 5-star because I did have some little kind of complaints about it, but it just had such an emotional impact on me in several different moments. This book made me cry in several different moments that I was like, it would be offensive to give it anything other than a 5-star after the experience that I had with it. This story is a partly inspired by real events, partly some things are fictionalized novel blend covering the victims of Ted Bundy. Basically, Jessica Knoll was watching one of the numerous Ted Bundy documentaries, and she was watching a scene where the judge ends up calling Ted Bundy a bright young man, and she unleashed her fury on the world in this book and said, abso-freaking-lutely not. It's about the bright young women. It's not about this man who is no more intelligent than anyone else. He is a doofus, and he ended up getting to go all the places he went because of the incompetence of other people in positions who should have done their jobs better to keep him contained and to not leave him unleashed on this world to commit the horrendous acts that he did. This is a story about the women. This is a story truly about the women who were affected by this horrible, horrible man, and it does not glorify him at all. It does not even mention his name a single time in this book. She refers to him as the defendant and refuses to let him have any glorification whatsoever in this book. So if you find yourself feeling a bout of feminine rage and you want to really feel heard and you want to really feel your power, read this book. It was done really wonderfully. There's a lot of really impactful quotes in here. I cried several times while reading it. I cried thinking about it. I'm gonna cry right now. There were so many moments in here that just they were amazing. I will say in general, I don't consume a ton of true crime in general. I definitely did more a couple years ago, and I don't really do it as much now because, like many people, I think it kind of had this explosive moment where true crime became so popular, and I would listen to the podcasts and I would talk about it with my friends and just become really, really obsessed with it. And then shortly after that period, more conversations started to be had about the ethics of true crime consumption and how can we consume it ethically, if at all. And it's ironic because this book is talking about that, like it's entering itself into that discussion, but also it can't exist without also being a part of that discussion. And it makes me wonder, like, is this ethical that this was even done? That Jessica Knoll is the one telling this story when this person could be telling their own story, and I think is telling their own story. I haven't fully figured out that yet, but I'm pretty sure she's writing her own book. So then that's kind of weird in itself. So I have some like ethical questions about this book that I can't help but ask myself, but I can assure you that this book does not glorify this horrendous man. It just like drags him to hell and back. And it really focuses on the women, and it really humanizes them in a lot of ways, and it really tells a powerful story about survivors, both in the main characters you're following, but even just hearing about some side characters and how their lives went on. It was just really, really powerful. So definitely a standout from the month. So that's it for all the books I read in the month of November. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what you think, or let me know if I convinced you to pick any of them up. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!